They were famous weapon makers before the Iron Sisters began to forge all the Shadowhunter blades. Wayland the Smith made Excalibur and Joyeuse, Arthur's and Lancelot's swords, and Durandal, the sword of the hero Roland. And they made this sword, too, from the same steel. All steel must be tempered, subjected to great heat, almost enough to melt or destroy the metal to make it stronger. He'd kissed the top of her head. Carstairs have carried this sword for generations. The inscription reminds us that Shadowhunters are the angels' weapons. Temper us in the fire and we grow stronger. When we suffer, we survive. Emma could hardly wait the 6 years until she would be 18, when she could travel the world to fight demons, when she could be tempered in fire. Now she strapped the sword on and left the changing room, picturing how it would be. In her imagination, she was standing on top of the bluffs over the sea at Point Dume, fending off a cadre of Ram demons with Cortana. Julian was with her, of course, wielding his own favorite weapon, the crossbow. In Emma's mind, Jules was always there. Emma had known him for as long as she could remember. The Blackthorns and the Carstairs had always been close, and Jules was only a few months older. She'd literally never lived in a world without him in it. She'd learned to swim in the ocean with him when they'd both been babies. They'd learned to walk together and then run together. She had been carried in his parents' arms and corralled by his older brother and sister when misbehaving. And they'd misbehaved often. Dyeing the puffy white Blackthorn family cat Oscar bright blue had been Emma's idea when they were both 7. Julian had taken the blame anyway. He often did. After all, he'd pointed out she was an only child and he was one of 7. His parents would forget they were angry with him a lot more quickly than hers would. She remembered when his mother had died just after Tavi had been born, and how Emma had stood holding Jules's hand while the body had burned in the canyons, and the smoke had climbed towards the sky. She remembered that he'd cried, and remembered thinking that boys cried so differently from girls, with awful, ragged sobs that sounded like they were being pulled out with hooks. Maybe it was worse for them because they weren't supposed to cry. Oh! Emma staggered back. She'd been so lost in thought that she plowed right into Julian's father, a tall man with the same tousled brown hair as most of his children. "Sorry, Mr. Blackthorn." He grinned. "Never seen anyone so eager to get to lessons before," he called as she darted down the hall. The training room was one of Emma's favorite rooms in the whole building. It took up almost an entire level, and both the east and west walls were clear glass. You could see blue sea nearly everywhere you looked. The curve of the coastline was visible from north to south, the endless water of the Pacific stretching out towards Hawaii. In the center of the highly polished wood floor stood the Blackthorn family tutor, a commanding woman named Katerina, currently engaged in teaching knife-throwing to the twins. Livy was following instructions obligingly, as she always did, but Ty was scowling and resistant. Julian, in his loose, light training clothes, was lying on his back near the west window, talking to Mark, who had his head stuck in a book and was doing his best to ignore his younger half-brother. "Don't you think Mark is kind of a weird name for a Shadowhunter?" Julian was saying as Emma approached. "I mean, if you really think about it, it's confusing. Put a mark on me, Mark." Mark lifted his blonde head from the book he was reading and glared at his younger brother. Julian was idly twirling a steely in his hand. He held it like a paintbrush, something Emma was always scolding him about. You were supposed to hold a steely like a steely as if it were an extension of your hand, not an artist's tool. Mark sighed theatrically. At 16, he was just enough their senior to find everything Emma and Julian did either annoying or ridiculous. "If it bothers you, you can call me by my full name," he said. "Mark Antony Blackthorn?" Julian wrinkled his nose. "It takes a long time to say. What if we got attacked by a demon? By the time I was halfway through saying your name, you'd be dead." "In this situation, are you saving my life?" Mark asked. "Getting ahead of yourself, don't you think, Pipsqueak?" "It could happen." Julian, not pleased to be called a pipsqueak, sat up. His hair stuck out in wild tufts all over his head. His older sister Helen was always attacking him with hairbrushes, but it never did any good. He had the Blackthorn hair, like his father and most of his brothers and sisters, wildly wavy, the color of dark chocolate. The family resemblance always fascinated Emma, who looked very little like either of her parents, unless you counted the fact that her father was blonde. Helen had been in Idris for months now with her